Hello, everyone. Richard Fredrickson here with one more in our series of business profiles here on Channel 6 and YouTube. And today's guest is John.Greuling, President and CEO of the Will County Economic Development. And John, how are you, my friend?
Doing well today, Richard. It's a wonderful day in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I've heard that somewhere. Yes, it is. Yeah. Well, John, we have a lot of territory to cover here, but just ever so briefly, some of the folks, particularly those who are watching on YouTube, may not be familiar with the CED. So what is the role, what's the purpose, what's the mission?
Sure. Thank you, Richard. Pleasure to be here. Well, the Will County Center for Economic Development was formed in the early 80s during the last Great Recession, when Joliet and Will County found itself back on its heels economically. Two steel mills had closed. The Joliet Arsenal was ramping down. Caterpillar cut thousands of jobs. And, the situation was pretty bleak. And there were a number of business people that were based in Joliet and said, we gotta take care of this. We've got to make sure that this doesn't happen to Will County and Joliet again. And it was people like Frank Turk Jr. and Bob Rugina and Kevin Reardon and the founding fathers, if you will. And they came together and they formed the Center for Economic Development as a private, not-for-profit development corporation. And its sole purpose, and it's great working for this organization because the mission hasn't changed in all those years. It's very simple: help existing Will County businesses grow and expand, recruit new companies to Will County and create new jobs, and create wealth through creation of jobs and new investment. And I think we've had a pretty good run this last 25 years. And I think the CED and its board and its membership and the public leadership that we collaborate with are responsible in a large way for a lot of the good economic development activities that have occurred here.
In Will County, we know what's going on nationally in Illinois, but this COVID-19, this virus, what impact, and I realize there's quite a bit of impact, on business and industry here in Will County?
Well, it's interesting. None of us have seen anything like this before, and certainly when you have a health crisis, and then in order to deal with the health crisis, we had to put our economy in sort of an induced coma, literally overnight. And I think it was a shock to the system all over the country, and Illinois and Will County and our communities weren't exempt from that. We during the worst part of the pandemic, Richard, we were approaching the highest unemployment rate in Will County that we ever had. It was very close to that time back in the early 80s. 17.5% was the unemployment rate in April. Many of our restaurants obviously closed. Some may not reopen. Retailers already struggling, fighting e-commerce and the new way of doing business. And let's face it, there's probably at least a dozen people in everybody's family that had never bought anything online before and discovered the convenience. And so that was another sort of gut punch to retailers. But at the end of the day, I think because of the things Illinois did, the Will County Health Department, certainly our governor did a great role in leadership. We're finding Illinois starting to come out of this. And, we got some great news this morning. I mentioned that the unemployment rate in Will County in April was 17.5%. In May, it went down to 14.9%. Now, in any other year, that would still sound like an incredibly high unemployment rate, and people like me would be jumping off the top of this Bays building. But the reality is, that kind of an adjustment in just a 30-day period, I think, shows a lot of promise in terms of how fast the recovery will be. The other thing was May retail sales nationally went up almost 18%. So the swings in this economic impact from the pandemic are quite amazing. And I think there's a lot of economists sort of scratching their head, wondering what's going to happen for the next few months. The scary thing, though, is what's happening now in a lot of states that had started to get back to normal, and they're now retrenching. You see what's happening in Texas, in Florida, and California, and a lot of people thought, well, maybe we're out of the woods. Well, as you know, we're not out of the woods, and I think we have to keep our good practices, social distancing, wearing our masks, washing our hands, and making sure we're taking care of ourselves and each other. But right now, we're on a good trajectory here in Will County, and it's very exciting for us.
Yeah, and especially now, since when we go on the air, we'll be in the fourth phase,
right,
here in Illinois. So all of that advice and more is needed. From almost a coma into what's happening now in Will County, I would ask John.Greuling, what perchance is our current update on business and development here in Will County?
Well, it's interesting, and I think it may fly in the face of some of the community people that are not so crazy about logistics and transportation and trucks. But when you look at what's happened to the global supply chain during this pandemic, there was a much higher reliance on the supply chain, primarily rail, truck, and waterborne freight. And as you know, we've been developing the largest inland container port, largest inland port period in North America. And our businesses in the logistics sector have been thriving this last 6 months. I'll give you an example. Amazon, which is, obviously one of the big detractors from bricks and mortar retail, but they are real, they're here, and they're not going away. In the last 6 months, they've announced or opened 6 new distribution fulfillment centers in the south and the southwest suburbs. 2 recently announced this past week in Cook County, in Markham and Madison. We've got 2 in one of which is in University Park, another one in Wilmington. We've got 2 in Shanahan. So this is this has really just accelerated the successful business environment we've had with global logistics. But that's not all. When you look at the other essential items that people need, the soaps and the sanitizers and so forth, our petrochemical industries are working at full tilt right now. Companies like Stepan Chemical and DuPont, there's high demand for the products that they make. And then the other sector, which we all know has had challenges, but also will benefit over the long run, and that's the healthcare system. And I think our hospitals stood up very well to the crisis. And I think, that's a selling point for Will County when you talk about quality of life. We can point to the peak part of our pandemic environment here, and we can show that our hospitals were able to take care of sort of hopefully the worst case scenario when it came to people that came down with COVID-19. So, just to name a couple of other projects, something that is very exciting is we just had a new headquarters open in Joliet off of Route 6, right at the end of Humboldt Road there, right where the bridge is going to connect I-80 with the intermodal centers. GP Transco, which is a national logistics company, they've built a new headquarters right at that little industrial park there, right next to the new 1.5 million square foot or 1.2 million square foot Target distribution center. It's 100 jobs plus a couple hundred drivers, and this this is sort of the next wave of distributional logistics. We've had a lot of warehouses, distribution centers, but now we're seeing the companies that are paying better wages, headquarters, service companies, a lot of mechanics, engineers, and I think that bodes well for us. The other projects that have been, really exciting for us, one that a lot of people don't realize, but it's probably the single largest industrial development project in terms of value and size that has ever happened in Will County, and that's Jackson Generation. Jackson Generation is building a 1,200 megawatt natural gas-fired electric generation plant down in Elwood off of just north of Arsenal Road. And it's an amazing project, international investment. Hundreds of tradespeople are working out there right now, and it's going to spin off good jobs and lots of taxes for our local taxing bodies. I mentioned the Amazon facilities. We've got a lot of other activity. Harbor Freight is building a 1.6 million square foot building in the Union Pacific Intermodal Yard. Diageo is ready to open their 1.5 million square foot distribution center to serve their bottling facility, the production facility that's been in Plainfield, for over 50 years, I think. And, so that just adds to the concentration, the critical mass, if you will, of these very good paying jobs. So, and I mentioned healthcare. Silver Cross is expanding their main building by 56,000 square feet. And when that's done, we'll have the only level 3 neonatal intensive care unit for our very young citizens here in Will County. And again, I talk about quality of life. It's these kinds of projects that make us attractive, and not just for businesses to come here, but for people to live here. And, maybe the pandemic will chase a few of those Chicagoites out here to Will County. We a real opportunity.
That was my next question for you, because we have these new developments and new businesses moving out, and have them moving out. For the most part, not all, but for the most part, it's a younger demographic that's coming out here to do much of this work. Now, I'm not talking about the construction workers. I'm talking about the permanent workers. What, if any, news are you hearing from the world of real estate as to what changes, transitions? Are they looking for homes? Are they looking for apartments, condos? What's the outlook for our new workforce?
Well, I think, one thing that benefits us a lot, Richard, is the fact that our labor pool that we can draw from is huge because we're part of a major metropolitan area. And people, even though we lack some of the public transportation services that you can get a little closer into the city, our highway network is still very good, and our reach into this labor force is very, very strong. I mean, there's some of our facilities along I-80 and further south into Elwood that over 50% of their workers drive more than 20 miles to their job. And the jobs are attractive enough for that kind of daily drive. But we think a key to the future of our business success is going to be to build housing that is more attractive to not just younger workers, but workers of all age. And one of the things that we were challenged with, you remember back in the 2000 aughts, when we were probably the fastest growing county in the Midwest, 25,000 people a year were moving into Will County. We were building over 8,000 single family homes a year. Since the recession, we haven't built more than 1,500 single family units a year. And so really one of the crises, and I call it that because I think we really need to take a serious look at working on this, is that our housing inventory is very low. Our housing inventory is at a situation that if you want to sell a house, it's probably pretty good. But if you're looking for a variety of housing types, it's something that we lack. And one of the things that we're starting to talk to our communities about is looking at these multifamily projects. We need, some condominium projects, some townhome projects, and rental projects to provide housing for a very mobile workforce. We're not going to have, increased bus service and metro service and subway service out here anytime soon. So at some point, our ability to maintain a good workforce for our employers, it's going to take more housing. And I think we're starting to turn the corner there. Lockport has a huge multifamily development going on, mixed use up at 355 and Archer Avenue. Plainfield has a project. New Lenox has got a project, multifamily right next to what's going to be their new metro station. Transit-oriented development. So if you live in the city, you can work in the city, you can live out here, or vice versa. So I think some of our communities are starting to get it, and I think over time the market will bear out. We're talking to a lot of developers that are interested in building more multifamily housing out here. One of the best places to build some of this is where retail that was planned is not going to go. As people, as grandma buys more and more things online, she's not going to some of these stores anymore. So some of this planned retail space could easily be converted to mixed-use multifamily with a coffee shop and a restaurant and so forth, and really create sort of a lifestyle development in some of our towns. So I think we've got a real strong opportunity to make us not just a place for jobs and businesses, but really as a place to live.
Yeah. There's two projects that come to mind that would probably be right in line with that. That's the Costco project in Plainfield, Joliet, off of I-55.
Right.
A lot of land there. Room for condos and not just Costco, but plenty of room for that. And then, of course, there's the Cullinan properties and development. If that's still a go, I believe it is, at I-80 and I-55.
Yeah, they're working with IDOT on, expanding that interchange. And of course, that's the secret sauce to that project. And they're making a lot of headway. They've got funding to build that interchange. They still need a few agreements to be executed. But they're anxious to get out into the marketplace. And that project's going to look different than it probably was supposed to be from the beginning. There was going to be a lot of retail out there. We'll see some retail, but I think there'll be a lot of destination, entertainment, hotels, restaurants, the big movie theater, maybe one of these big indoor golf places or skydiving places. I think the opportunity for a lot of different kinds of uses because of the location. I mean, it's at Main in North America. And the volume of traffic that goes through there every day is just a natural magnet for people to go there. So yeah, I think we've got a lot of projects that will attract some people, and again, not in the traditional retail sense, but in the new way we're living.
It's interesting you're talking about housing and in workplaces. Something took place during this virus. People were not working in the office.
Right.
They were working remotely at home. Now, some have returned. Some will be returning soon. Others will be saying to their management, hey, listen, I'm getting the job done here. How about if I just stay here and work remotely?
Right.
That's happening.
Right. And it's not just the workers that are starting to talk that way. It's the employers. And I think, it may be a good reason for us not to have a lot of big office towers because, there's a lot of big companies that have learned during this period working from home is really a benefit to employees. They don't have to drive. They don't have to ride public transit. They don't have to, pay for parking. Plus, they're good or for bad, but in some cases they're close to the house. And depending on where education and school is going to be for the next year or so, that could be a benefit in terms of childcare and everything else. So I think we're going to see. It's not going to be a huge shift. I think over time we're going to see more and more work from home situations, and I think people have learned how to deal with that, whether they like it or not. I think that we'll see how that plays out. But I think it's definitely an attractive alternative, and it's going to save companies a lot of money.
Yes, and now we're going to go back to Silver Cross Hospital. I just thought about this. I was just there a few days ago, and traveling back west on, I think that's 6. Mm-hmm. And what phenomenal amount of land that's still there.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's going to be, in 5 years, that's going to be a whole different area beyond the hospital complex. I mean,
right.
Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because back when let's call it the discussion was going on about moving Silver Cross from the east side to the I-55 Route 6 interchange, Joliet was obviously concerned about that. But and I still believe this, and they're going through a new comprehensive planning process. I think they need to look at that stretch of Route 6 between Briggs and 355 as potentially being a very, very active commercial mixed-use corridor. You've got an anchor at one end with the hospital. If you could get, maybe a headquarters, an insurance company, maybe a mixed-use development further west, and then you would start seeing, that corridor develop. And I think it's a natural. And the other, not best kept secret, but an area that is ripe for development as we come out of this pandemic is that whole 355 I-80 interchange. I mean, it's not, you look at what the hospital's done. I mean, they've got, Richard, I think they've got close to 1 million square feet under roof there now. I mean, think about the hotel, the Class A hotels and the restaurants, and again, mixed use development. That whole 355 corridor will play a significant role in the future economy of Will County. And I think the communities are thinking about planning for things other than distribution centers along that corridor.
There is one project that was a few years back very hot, and it kind of disappeared, and it comes back up again. It's a little bit east of New Lenox, and right. It's eastern Will County, and it's called the Third Airport. Okay, let's
project near and dear to my heart, Richard. The South Suburban Airport. Somebody's going to write a book about that, and maybe you and I should start it and let somebody finish it once it opens. The Center for Economic Development has always supported that project, and Governor Quinn really moved that project forward. IDOT bought almost 5,000 acres outright acquisition. They condemned some land. They created a public-private partnership statute that would allow a private entity to come in and finance and build it and possibly operate it. And then Rauner came in and he put the bricks on all major projects. And not just that one. The other one is the Ileana. And now Pritzker comes along and proclaims it's time for a capital bill. And, we've been a huge beneficiary. Will County has been a huge beneficiary of that capital bill, with almost $2.5 billion of transportation funding that will be spent just in Will County over the next probably 5 to 7 years, based on how quickly the sales tax, the gas tax recovers. So over $1 billion for I-80. And a lot of people don't know that in the governor's budget last year, and now the new one for this coming year, He's put $200 million into that budget to build an interchange at I-57 that will provide direct access into the airport site. So even though the governor has not publicly said that the state's going to build an airport or fund it, I think by his commitment to throw some infrastructure funding at that gives us some hope that it may be a project that we could revitalize. There certainly is a lot of energy supporting this project from the south suburbs in Cook County, as you know. And I think, they see that as a tremendous jobs engine. We see it as a driver of, the next 50 to 100 years of our economy. And the interesting thing is, and we learned aviation, has to change. And the pandemic really slapped that sector pretty hard. The other thing that we learned is air cargo is not going away, and it's going to continue to expand. We think the third airport offers a great opportunity to build a facility that complements both O'Hare and Midway. Perhaps something that we would call an industrial airport. Doesn't have passenger service, has corporate aircraft, maybe it has maintenance facilities for some of the big carriers, perhaps a couple of air cargo hubs, training facilities. Lewis University has one of the leading drone programs in the country through their aviation program. A lot of people don't know that. We could create a huge drone port to serve the upper Midwest through this facility. And, the planning of this airport was to make sure that this airspace was protected for both Midway and O'Hare, so that there's room, if you will, quote unquote, for this third airport without inflecting or hurting the aviation that's happening at places. Actually, O'Hare and Midway are closer together to each other than Midway is closer to the third airport. A lot of people don't.
Interesting.
Yeah. No. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. I mean, it really depends on the state, but there's a lot of work going on and discussion about that, and who knows? Maybe we'll find a private investor that wants to build an airport and cuts a deal with the governor, and off we go.
Now, John, as you were going through the airport story, just in the very beginning of that story, you happened to mention some highway called the Ileana.
Yeah.
So what happens with that, perhaps, in the future?
Well, to be honest with you, again, that was a project that Governor Quinn was very high on. So was Governor Pence in Indiana and his predecessor. And I think, again, Rauner came in and said, budget's not in shape. We've got to stop these big projects. What's interesting about those two projects is that even though there's going to be state money, and over $100 million has been spent at the airport of state money already, but the primary funding was to come from a private partnership. And so it's not a public works project as much as, and these are both of them, both Ileana and the airport, as market-driven projects. And, private investors aren't going to put equity into a public works project if it's not going to make money. And so if they're going to take the risk, they want to make sure that this project is going to be successful. And we were really close on the Ileana, to tell you the truth. We had, the state had put out for bid packages. They had 5 or 6 teams that bid on building the Ileana. And then again, Quinn lost the election. I'll be honest with you, though, with our success with the I-80 project and the work we did with our freight mobility plan, it really showed that I-80 needed to be addressed first. A lot of people thought that if you built the Ileana, you wouldn't have to do anything to the I-80 corridor. That's not true. As we all know, I-80 is falling apart. Even if we built the Ileana, I-80 would still have to be, for the most part, rebuilt. And so I think the lesson learned here is we did a lot of hard lobbying on getting more than our fair share of the capital bill, working with labor and the road builders and business and government. And even though it's not been publicly stated, I think if the governor was talking to me today, he would say, Greuling, we gave you I-80. Let's put the Ileana on the back burner for a while. And you know what? It's probably not a bad idea. But like the airport, you and I may not see it, but the Ileana, or some version of it, is going to be built someday. It has to be. We just don't have some of us don't have the vision that maybe we need to make sure projects like this happen. But we'll see. Will County has a long way to go in terms of economic development. And with the leadership from groups like ours and chambers and the elected officials and labor, I think the sky is really the limit here.
That's one important factor in view of Will County. Those entities that you just mentioned,
right,
unlike a lot of other counties, pretty much work well together.
Yes. I get comments from developers and real estate people and corporate executives all the time, even if they don't come to Will County, as we sort of do the dance with them to try and convince them we've got a place to house their operations. I often hear the comment that, you know what, you guys make it really easy to do business here. I can walk into a city hall, I can get introduced to the municipal leadership, I can meet the building inspector, I can meet with the head of the building trades, I can meet with the workforce people, I can meet with the state of Illinois and Will County officials, and essentially I only have to make one phone call. That's sort of the beauty of the team that we've put together here. And it's not just us, as you mentioned, it's all of us. And if we weren't willing to work together, this county would be a lot worse for wear, coming out of the recession of the 80s. My hat's off to all of the people that have worked on this all these years. I've said it before, this is the best gig I've ever had. That's why I've been here almost 20 years.
And this is one of my better interviews because I love talking with you, John, because we get so much information. We really find out what's happening in the county. And, whether it's radio or television, cable, print, we're pretty much negative stuff out there every single day. It's good to hear from you. We get some clarity, we get some focus, and we get to look a little bit at the future. John.Greuling, President and CEO of the Will County Economic Development. Thank you so very much. Take care.
Thank you.
I'm Richard Frederickson, and this has been one of the series of Business Profiles.